He found her bracelet in the sand, then she appeared at sunset. The desert slept beneath a sky the color of rust, bruised and breathless from another endless day. The sun, swollen and low, dragged its dying light across the ribs of the earth, turning every grain of sand into a memory of fire. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, the wind rose and fell again, too weary to carry even the ghost of a song. Only silence moved here now, a wide, endless kind that made a man feel small enough to disappear inside it. Cattle trails cut through the dust like forgotten scars, winding toward nowhere. The wooden bones of an old corral leaned into the dusk, half-eaten by time. A lone fence post creaked when the wind brushed past it, as if trying to remember a name it once knew. Even the shadows seemed tired, dragging themselves across the desert floor as the light bled away. Out beyond the ridge, the air shimmered, a mirage of silver heat dancing on the bones of the land. The desert had a way of swallowing everything, footsteps, prayers, promises. And yet, tonight, it held its breath, as if waiting for something, or someone, to break the quiet. A hawk circled overhead, gliding low before vanishing into the amber horizon. Dust devils rose and died again, whispering secrets to the sand. It was a place built on silence and endurance, where men came to forget, and the land helped them do it slowly. Down in the low valley, an old ranch house sat like a scar on the edge of the world. Its windows glowed faintly, warm against the coming dark, the kind of light that didn't invite company, only kept the loneliness from freezing solid. Inside, somewhere between the smell of old wood and gun oil, a man moved, slow, deliberate, the weight of years sitting heavy on his shoulders. He didn't speak much anymore. The desert had taken that from him long ago. Outside, the evening wind shifted, carrying with it something faint, the soft jingle of metal against stone. A sound that didn't belong here. He paused, stepping out onto the porch. The last of the sun caught his face, roughened, weathered, eyes like the land itself, dry, steady, unblinking. The sound came again, softer this time, a whisper caught between gusts. He followed it down the steps, boots sinking into the sand. And there, half buried at his feet, something glinted, a thin silver bracelet, dusted with the color of the dying day. The sky deepened into a bruised violet as he bent to pick it up. The metal was warm, almost alive in his hand. He looked out across the vast emptiness, the horizon still burning with the last breath of the sun, and for the first time in a long while, the desert didn't feel entirely empty. He turned the bracelet over in his palm, watching the sunset bleed through its silver curve. It was small, delicate, too soft a thing to have survived out here. No name, no mark, just a faint scratch across the metal that caught the dying light like a scar. He looked toward the ridge again, where the desert folded into shadow. The wind had changed, it carried something else now. Something human. He started walking. Boots sank deep into the warm dust, each step a slow echo against the silence. The air thickened, heavy with the smell of iron and dry sage. He moved like a man chasing a ghost, guided by instinct more than reason. And then, just past a cluster of brittle yucca, he saw her. At first, she looked like part of the earth, a shape half swallowed by sand and dusk. Her hair, dark and tangled, caught the last glint of sunlight. One arm was stretched forward, fingers limp, as if reaching for the horizon she never reached. Her dress was torn, the hem caked with dust and dried blood. A broken saddle lay nearby, its leather cracked and twisted, the remains of a horse long gone. He crouched beside her without a word. Her breath was there, faint, shallow, a whisper caught between life and surrender. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't need to. Some things the desert didn't explain, it just delivered them to whoever was still listening. He slipped off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, the fabric swallowing her small frame. His hands were rough but careful, the kind that remembered how to build, how to mend, how to hold without hurting. He reached for his canteen, tilted it gently to her lips. A single drop slid down, tracing the dirt on her cheek like a tear she no longer had strength to shed. The wind moved again, brushing sand across their faces. Somewhere behind them, the sun died completely, leaving only the echo of color. He lifted her then, slow, steady, the weight of her body trembling against his chest. The desert had taken many things from him, but tonight it gave something back, fragile, silent, almost sacred. As he carried her toward the faint glow of the ranch house, the sky turned to ash. Coyotes howled in the far distance, their cries weaving through the cold like old songs of mourning. He didn't look back. Only tightened his hold and kept walking, the silver bracelet glinting faintly from his pocket, a promise he didn't yet understand. The first night, she slept on the cot near the fire, motionless, wrapped in his old blanket that smelled of dust, pine, and solitude. He sat by the window, watching the lantern flicker against the walls, its glow crawling through the cracks of old wood like memory itself. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the house, whispering across the shutters. He didn't sleep. Just listened, to her shallow breathing, to the world holding its breath. At dawn, the desert turned gold again, washing the room in a tired kind of light. He brewed coffee on the stove, the scent curling through the air like smoke from a prayer. When she stirred, he didn't speak, only poured water into a tin cup and set it by her hand. She drank slowly, her eyes flicking toward him once, then away, like a deer learning if the forest still meant safety. He nodded once, silent, then turned back to the stove. Days passed in that quiet rhythm, two strangers held together by the sound of wind and wood. He built her a chair from the old corral planks, each nail struck with slow precision. When he placed it by the hearth, she hesitated before sitting, running her fingers over the grain, rough wood smoothed by care. The gesture said what neither of them could. In the evenings, he'd light the oil lamp while she mended torn cloth by its soft glow. The rhythm of their movements filled the silence, the scrape of a match, the pull of thread, the sigh of the wind outside. Sometimes she would hum under her breath, a low, wordless sound, like something the desert itself remembered. He never asked the tune. He just listened. One evening, a sandstorm rolled in, the kind that turned the sky copper and made the house shiver with each gust. He bolted the shutters while she steadied the lamp, her small hands shaking against the glass. When the flame flickered near death, his hand closed over hers, steadying it. For a heartbeat, the storm outside and the storm between them went silent. By the time the wind died, the house felt different, not less lonely, but warmer, like a wound learning to close. She looked around the room, the chair, the cup, the blanket, the steady fire, and for the first time since waking, she whispered something soft. He didn't catch the words. Didn't need to. Sometimes the smallest sound in a quiet room means you've been heard. Outside, the night spread wide and still. Inside, two souls moved through their silence, no longer strangers, just survivors sharing the same breath. The fire cracked once, softly, like an old heart remembering how to beat. The days grew slower after the storm. The air softened, carrying the scent of mesquite and morning dew. She began to move about the cabin, quiet as a thought, touching things that weren't hers, yet seemed to remember her somehow. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't empty anymore, it was gentle, like something that had finally found a place to rest. One afternoon, while he mended a saddle by the porch, she stepped outside, holding the silver bracelet he'd found. It gleamed faintly in the light, polished clean now, her fingerprints marking its curve. She turned it over and whispered, "It was my sister's." Then nothing more. He looked up, eyes catching hers for the first time in full daylight. There was no need to ask what had happened. The desert carried loss in every grain of sand, he could recognize its weight in the way she stood. He nodded once, slow, and went back to stitching leather, each pull of thread another word he didn't know how to say. That night, the moon rose pale over the plains. She sat by the fire, brushing her hair, the flames painting gold into the dark strands. He caught sight of a scar running just beneath her shoulder, old and pale like a faded riverbed. He didn't stare, just looked away, the way a man does when something sacred is shown to him. Later, while she slept, he stepped out to the porch. The stars stretched forever, cold, distant, countless. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a photograph, a woman holding a child, both faces worn by time and memory. He had stopped looking at it years ago. Now, under the same sky that had taken them, he looked again. In the morning, she found the photo resting on the table. No note, no words. Just the picture, worn at the edges. She studied it for a long time, tracing the image with her finger. Then she placed the bracelet beside it, two ghosts meeting in the light. When he came in, she said quietly, "They left me when the sun fell." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from remembering. He didn't answer. Just reached for the coffee pot, poured 2 cups, and set one before her. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of a promise, that neither of them would have to face the sunrise alone again. Outside, the desert shimmered beneath the morning light, endless and forgiving. Inside, the house breathed softer, as if it, too, had healed a little. The photo and bracelet lay side by side on the table, 2 small relics of pain now sharing the same quiet peace. The wind changed that afternoon, sharper, colder, carrying more than just dust. He felt it before he heard it, the low thunder of hooves rolling over the ridge. 3 riders. Dark shapes against the copper light. Lawmen, by the look of their coats and the way their rifles glinted like reason turned cruel. He didn't move. Just watched from the porch, jaw set, the weight of choice already in his chest. Inside, she froze by the window. Her eyes, once hollow, now alive, widened with a fear that didn't need words. "They're looking for me," she whispered, the words thin as wine through dry grass. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. The desert didn't send the innocent running this far unless it had a reason. He crossed the room, slow and steady, and opened the trapdoor beneath the rug, the old root cellar where he once kept supplies, now half empty. She hesitated, hand gripping the doorframe. "If they find me here," he met her gaze. "They won't." The riders stopped at the gate, dust rising around them like ghosts. The leader, a man with eyes the color of gunmetal, called out. "Evening, sir. We're looking for a runaway. Came through this way 2 nights back. You seen anyone?" He leaned on the porch rail, the silver of the setting sun catching his worn belt buckle. "Just me and the land," he said. The lie came quiet, steady as a prayer. The officer studied him for a moment too long. The silence between them stretched thin, humming with danger. Inside the cellar, she pressed a hand over her mouth, tears tracing lines through the dust on her skin. Above her, she could hear every footstep, every creak of the porch. When the sound of boots approached the door, her breath caught. Then, a pause. And his voice again. "Don't waste daylight chasing ghosts. She's gone farther than this place will let you ride." The lawmen lingered, then turned their horses toward the fading sun. When the last hoofbeat died, he stayed still, listening until even the wind relaxed again. Then he opened the cellar door. She climbed out slowly, her eyes glistening in the dim firelight. "You risked your life," she said. He shook his head. "Didn't feel like mine to keep." They stood in the quiet, 2 silhouettes against the flicker of the hearth. Outside, the wind swept the dust clean again, erasing the prints of men who came to take what wasn't theirs. Inside, something unspoken settled between them, not safety, not peace, but a bond strong enough to be worth the danger. The desert had softened. Mornings came slower now, wrapped in light the color of wheat. He'd begun fixing the fence by the corral again, though there was nothing left to keep inside. She would bring him water, quiet as dawn, her steps tracing a path the sand had learned by heart. Neither spoke much, silence had become their language, and it said everything. One evening, the wind returned gentle and warm, carrying the faint smell of rain. They sat outside beneath the porch roof, watching the clouds turn violet. She held the silver bracelet in her hands, the one that had started it all, turning it over, tracing the scars on the metal the way one reads a memory. Then, softly, she slipped it onto his wrist. "It should belong to someone who stayed," she said. He looked down, rough, sunburned skin against silver. It didn't shine. It settled, like it had been waiting for that place all along. He didn't answer. Just reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a carving of a horse, whittled from the old fence wood. Crude, simple, but alive. He placed it in her palm. "Found him in the scraps," he said quietly. Her fingers closed around it, trembling, then still. The night deepened. The horizon burned low with the last blush of day. They sat there, side by side, the way you sit when words would only cheapen what's already understood. When the wind grew colder, he draped his coat over her shoulders again, the same one she had worn the night he found her. But this time, she leaned into it, into him, without fear. A coyote called from the distance, long and low, a song of both loss and belonging. She looked toward the sound, then back at him. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said, barely above a whisper. The words hung between them, fragile, certain, enough. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. His hand found hers, fingers rough against smooth skin, steady as the land itself. Somewhere in that touch, something mended, not fast, not loud, just quietly right. The kind of healing that only happens when two broken things fit back together without trying to be whole. The fire inside the cabin flickered through the open door, spilling golden light across the porch, two silhouettes, still, breathing, belonging. The desert watched, patient and kind, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like an endless place. It felt like home. The desert stretched wide beneath a newborn dawn, the same land, the same wind, but the silence had changed. Where once it had swallowed every sound, now it carried something softer, the faint clink of a bracelet against a cup, the echo of laughter carried slow through the morning air. The sky, once rust and sorrow, bled into gold. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and outside the old house, two figures moved in easy rhythm, feeding the horses, mending the day. Nothing grand, nothing loud, just life, stitched back together by quiet hands. Far out on the plain, the sun lifted its weary head, turning every grain of sand into light again. And though the wind still wandered, restless and free, it no longer sounded lonely. It carried warmth. It carried memory. It carried them. The wind still carried dust, but now, it carried their laughter too.